Hello, how are you? This is my spoiler-free review of The Mask of Mirrors, which is the first book in the Rook Rose trilogy by M.A. Carrick. Or rather, Marie Brennan and Douglas Helms writing together as M.A. Carrick. Potato potato. The second book, The Liar's Knot, is already out, and the third book, Labyrinth's Heart, is slated for release next year. But I want to talk about the first book since I haven't read the second book yet. I said I was going to read it in May, and I keep putting it off, and now it growls at me every time I pass by it in the hallway. Oops. Come to think of it, I may just review each book in the series individually. Is that what people do? Who knows? I don't. Before I begin, this is a spoiler-free review, as I said. If you have read The Mask of Mirrors and you want to hear another person's perspective, then stick around and I'll try to provide. But if you haven't read the book yet and you need something to sway you, then buckle your seatbelts. Actually, this review was supposed to be the first video for this channel, and was slated to go up last October, but as you can probably guess, I chickened out, like a boss. But to be honest, what's the point of writing more than 2,000 words if you're just gonna throw that review in the trash? And The Mask of Mirrors was one of my favorite reads of 2021, so I think you can guess why I decided to rework this review. To clarify, I did draw something in that review video, but the art you're seeing here is entirely new to reflect my current art style. And with that said, yeah, let's get into it. The story starts with the main character, Ren, arriving in the city of Nadezhra in an attempt to con her way into the family register of a borderline Baroque noble house to get the money she needs to secure her future. This doesn't go as smoothly as she hoped, however, as soon after her arrival, a new form of nightmare magic begins making the rounds. It's like lucid dreaming. But worse. Let's start with the plot. The first half of the story is excellent. For the first 300 pages, you really get a sense of what Nadezhra is like, along with the general atmosphere of the story. But I'll get to the world building in a bit. Upon her return to Nadezhra, Ren quickly tries to make waves among the nobility, but she soon realizes that, 1, she's not the only one with a trick up her sleeve, and 2, there's some crazy stuff going on that ends up rearing its ugly head in the second half of the book. Everything is a blend of glamour and mystery and a sort of political intrigue, all while this new form of nightmare magic begins making the rounds. And then everything culminates in absolute chaos. I'm not going to say any more because of spoilers, but I will leave you to think on that for a bit. The pacing of the book is, in my eyes, nicely done throughout, and it's quite a feat to have your book be 600 plus pages and manage to keep it mostly consistent, which is something I've been hard-pressed to find in the years that I've been reading seriously. But after the first half of the book, things take a bit of a nosedive. It's nothing serious, but without saying too much, I guess I was just thrown for a loop after what happened around the page 300 mark, because it takes a sort of 180 into the supernatural and metaphysical aspects of the book. Which brings me to my next point. I can't really say there is a hard singular magic system in the world of The Mask of Mirrors, mostly because there are at least 2 different forms that magic takes, which I thought was really interesting. The Rosenians, the indigenous population of Nadezhra, utilize a form of magic with a more metaphysical foundation, which is especially evident in the art of pattern reading, which in itself is very reminiscent of tarot. And not gonna lie, as someone who is acquainted with tarot, I got a little very excited when I saw the parallels. There's also the hallucinogenic drug Aja, which allows its users to see into a realm called Aja Dream, named after one of the multiple Rosenian deities. As for the Liganti, or the majority population, well, the noble population anyway, of Nadezhra, they rely on a form of sacred geometry known as the Numinata. Or is it Numinatria? To be honest, I've always been confused by the distinction, with each number from 0 to 9 having their own meaning, pattern, and function. Basically, it's geometry, but turned up to 11. In other words, my worst nightmare, because even though I like geometry, I do not like math. Outside of the magic aspects of the book, you're really given a feel for the world throughout. From the first chapters, we get a look at a city reshaped by colonialism in all its ugliness, and ruled by an oppressor-run nobility with a 5-person governing body at the top. And we learn pretty early on that the Rosenians and the Liganti have been butting heads for the last 200 years, and haven't exactly been on the best terms because of this. Practically the opposite, in fact. There are 3 primary cultures that we're introduced to in the first book, ranging from the Italian influence of the Liganti to the more Slavic influence, I think, of the Rosenians. There are also a few brief nods to the culture of Ceteris, which is implied to be based at least partially off ancient Rome. Not sure if we'll get a sort of world expansion with the other 2 books, but learning more about the world would be very nice. So now we get to the cast of characters, and there are a lot. Less the cast list at the back of the book, because there are a crap ton. All of the characters read as people with their own personalities and ambitions and goals, which I absolutely live for. Let's start with the main character, Ren, a con artist who poses as the daughter of a noblewoman born in Nadezhra. It's a long story, though we do learn in the prologue that she was in a really crappy situation with her sort of adoptive sister Tess. Of course, Ren is looking to give herself and her sister a better life, so what does she do? Con her way into a noble family and mooch off their money. Questionable at best, but live your life, I guess. In my opinion, Ren as a main character was very compelling. When the story starts, it's pretty clear that she's really only getting into the good graces of House Tremendous, the family she's trying to con, for the money she's after, and we get an interesting look into her thought process during the first act, which is always fun to see. As the story progresses, however, we get to see the more human side of Ren, especially as she continues to keep up her masquerade and continues to rack up more crap on her plate. Something else I want to point out is the sisterly bond between both Ren and Tess. Honestly, reading about their devotion to each other and the fact that they care about each other is chef's kiss. We love a good sister relationship in this house. Well, okay, they're not actually sisters, but my point still stands. Then there's Vargo, who... Bry's got a pet spider! I could make a video talking about how Vargo's pet spider Peabody is the true protagonist, but there's not enough substantial evidence to make one while attempting to take myself seriously for 10 minutes straight, so no. Maybe for April Fool's Day. As I was saying, we have Vargo, who is an up-and-coming crime lord of unknown origin, who's already got his hands on a good chunk of the Nadezhran underground, and he's also got a thing for spiders. Well, you know what they say, to each their own. He's definitely both cunning and intimidating, and will definitely not hesitate to kick you where it hurts and laugh about it later. And when we're first introduced to Vargo, we find out that he's also Ren's landlord. Awkward! Vargo's introduction may be unassuming for some people, though in the matter of about 100 pages, he's set up as one of the major characters in the story. And that there's a lot more to him than what's initially led on. Again, enterprising crime lord. He's also acquaintances with a very enigmatic man named Alcius, who I can't really talk about without dropping spoilers, but I'm really interested to see if their relationship will be expanded upon in The Liar's Knot. As much of a jerk face as he is, Vargo himself was also really intriguing to read about, more so towards the end, and considering The Liar's Knot is looking like it'll be more focused on him, at least from first impressions, I'm pretty excited to see where his character arc goes from here. Rounding out the main trio, and arguably the most morally sound of the three, is Gray, an officer and captain of the Vigil. That is to say, the sort of acting police force in Nadezhra. And he's also a family friend of sorts of House Tremendous. You'd think he'd have it off easy because of his status in the Vigil, but that's not quite the case. Gray's fellow Brazenians see him as a turncoat because he's in the Vigil, while some of the Liganti officers... I think you can see where this is going. We learn early on that Gray is involving himself in the mystery of Nadezhran street children going missing, though we also learn that he's trying to solve the mystery of the warehouse fire that killed his older brother about 6 months before the story begins. I don't really have much to say about Gray, other than I wish I got a little more from his perspective, especially given his role in the narrative. He's not a bad character, and I liked seeing his interactions and relationships with some of the side characters as much as I liked the interactions between the other two main characters. Though, like I said, I did finish the book wanting just a bit more from him. But judging how the book ended, I think we may be getting just that in The Liar's Knot, which is always good news. For those of you who like larger casts, chances are you won't be disappointed, as there are a number of side characters who all carry their own weight in the story. Almost no one feels like they're there simply to move the story along, despite the enormous cast. Again, bless the cast list. And they all have varying degrees of meaningfulness to the narrative. Chief among them are House Tremendous, the unlucky subjects of Ren's con scheme. There's the head of the house, Donaya, who, due to a case of spectacularly bad luck, has had to cut back on a lot of things in order to save up on what little money her family has remaining. Donaya comes off as a bit stubborn and obstinate, though given her circumstances, it's pretty understandable. Then you have her two children, Leato and Juna, who are both charming in their own ways, and who both happen to be some of my favorite side characters in the story, along with Tess, who I also liked. Other notable side characters include Tanaquis, who comes off as some sort of astrologer figure, along with the swordsman Oksana Rivchek, who I wish we got more page time from. She mostly falls off the face of the earth after part 2, and honestly, it's a crime. And I would be remiss if I forgot about the Rook, urban legend vigilante supreme. He's a very intriguing character, and I really enjoyed trying to figure out just who was underneath that mask of his. And then there's House Indestor, Nadezhra's resident schmucks, but we don't talk about them. I will, however, say this. If you're currently reading The Mask of Mirrors and you thought they were already bad, brace yourselves. they're about to get worse. There are other things that I liked about The Mask of Mirrors, including the fact that the world is notably homonormative, which we stan. God's bless. Given the heteronormative pattern of fiction up until very recently, every time I see a novel that goes against that grain, it's such a breath of fresh air. And then there's the fashion. Can we talk about the costume choices for a minute? The descriptions of clothing can get old after a while, but that was not the case in The Mask of Mirrors. If you don't know me, I just need to say that I am a sucker for costume design, but I'm not sure if that says much. But I digress. The prose strikes a near perfect balance between accessible and stylized, if that's the right word, and that's something else that I appreciated as someone who has always been partial to that sort of equilibrium. On the other hand, I am still shook by the amount of deception that goes on in this book. Not to mention the red herrings all over the place. You're tricked into believing one thing, and then it turns out to be something else entirely. There is hardly a moment of respite, not even at the end. And I think that's what ultimately led to the solid pacing of The Mask of Mirrors. Personally, I'm someone who believes that if you can keep your readers on their toes the whole way through, you've done something right. And The Mask of Mirrors definitely achieves that. Overall, if you're a high fantasy connoisseur looking for a new read, I definitely recommend The Mask of Mirrors, especially if you're fond of nuanced world building like I am. I'm not sure I would recommend this book for people who are new to the genre because of how complex the world building is and the magic systems are. Though, if you are looking for something more heady than entry-level fantasy, then I'm not gonna stop you. The Mask of Mirrors is definitely a nuanced novel with a structure that feels organic on practically all levels and a very solid effort overall, especially for a debut novel. With that said, The Mask of Mirrors gets a 4.25 pet spiders out of 5. If you made it to the end of this review, thank you for sticking around. If you want more book talks, book reviews, drawings like the one you see here, and other shenanigans from me, then make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and help me find my missing sleep schedule or something. Thanks for watching!